Well, hello, welcome back to my studio. Today's a day you're probably going to be excited about. Today's the day I actually go into great detail in painting the sun and actually paint the sun in real time. So I've tried kind of depicting this before with the iPhone and it just doesn't, it's not capable of reading the subtleties. So we've shot this with the DSLR and I've already finished shooting it of me actually painting the sun in close up and it turned out really great. So if you've always wanted to see how I go about painting the sun, stick around and you'll see that. So before we get going, once again, I just want to let you know the colors I'm using and see how my palette's mixed. So we've started with we have a lemon yellow, a cadmium yellow light, a cadmium yellow medium, cadmium yellow deep, cadmium orange, cadmium red light, cadmium red medium, cadmium red deep. Then we have a magenta, we have a dioxazine purple, we have a phthalo blue, and we have a turquoise. Now we also have a alizarin crimson. I use that actually as I'm gradating the colors away from the reds into the browns, move away from the sun. And then I also have over here Prussian blue mixed with alizarin crimson, and that's what I use for my black. Now for the for basic kind of hardwood trees, so the trees that would normally be kind of black or very dark, I kind of stick to the outside of the color wheel here using kind of the pure colors. But for the birch trees, I have to go lighter, particularly where it's near the sun. So in here, I've mixed these lighter values, again, that go from yellow through orange to peach to magenta to purple to blue to turquoise. And I'm going to use this dark mixture to paint the scars on the birch trees. So let's change the camera angle and focus in on the sun, and I will show you how I paint a sun. Okay, so I'm ready to start painting my sun now. Boy, I have to say, it feels really weird using my iPhone and setting up the DSLR and not being able to see actually as I'm recording. It's also a bit of a pain having to change lenses to get a close-up because our zoom wouldn't go in tight enough, and also putting the sound recorder on to get the sound. But anyways, I think I've tried doing this before with the iPhone and it just cannot, just can't seem to get those subtle differences between the whites and the yellows. Oh, finger slipped there. One thing I was going to say, sometimes, usually I do this before I do too much work around the sun because it's easier if you can rest your finger on the painting without getting it into the wet paint. But what I'm doing now is the first thing I'll do is I'm going to create a circle around that white area. I guess I'm going to have to do this without resting my finger, which means I need to just pay a little bit more attention. I'm doing a circle of light yellow, so that's the lemon yellow mixed with the white of the paint, with the titanium white. And then what I'm going to do, so that's going to circle the entire sun. Then where I see branches coming out through the sun, I'm going to come in there with the lemon yellow and then the cadmium yellow. And those areas that are representative of branches are going to gradually get darker and go from yellows to oranges as we move away from the sun. But these two places here, these are going to be birch trees, so that's going to be handled actually quite differently because the birch trees are going to be, this is what happening, we're talking about that property of diffraction, where a light source next to very thin darks actually kind of bleaches out those thin darks. But because the birch trees themselves are white in local color, they're actually going to be lighter than these other branch shapes, which are representative of kind of like dark branches. And again, the whole idea is just as we move away from the sun, it goes from a light yellow to a warm yellow to an orange to a red. And I should say as well, the paints that I'm using, I've also mixed them with the Artisan Impasto medium from the water-soluble oils, and it is basically a marble dust ground up in the oil medium. And when you mix it in with your paints, well, if you're going to paint impasto with thick strokes, it helps the paint retain that texture better, but it also acts as a quick drying medium, and that's what I really want it for here, because I'll often have to go over this area several times to get everything just the way I want. But I need it to dry from that first application before I go in for the second one. And I find it easier if I paint the gradation in the branch shapes first before painting the areas of the sky. If I paint the white shape, then I end up getting my my paints all mushed together. The white mixing in with the yellows and the reds. And I'm coming up here now into the alizarin crimson, which is almost the same color as the actual canvas. And so when I go from red to start to go darker and cooler, I mix the red into the alizarin, and then I start going towards purples and even blues on the opposite side of that. Okay, so I've got that. That's extremely roughly painted there, but now I'll come in with pure titanium white. And this is the actual sun, and this needs to be pretty close to a accurate circle. And you can see, even though I had this painted white with gesso, it wasn't white at all. And even this, which probably looks white, it's white paint, but there's still a fair bit of the dark underpainting of the canvas that's kind of showing through this, that's making that white probably like at least one step darker than a pure white. But that's okay. This is the only place where I'll come in with like 3 coats of titanium white. So even if I've put white in other places, it's nowhere is it going to appear as light as in the sun, where I'll end up going over it several times. And now what I'm going to do is, and I do kind of, well, maybe see if I can get away without resting my fingers. But I'm painting everywhere where I see the color of the canvas showing through. That needs to be, or that is, sky. So I'm coming in here, and right next to the sun, I will actually paint just titanium white in these areas just right around the sun. This is a good exercise in brush control, not being able to rest my fingers there. And as I move away to the next level away from the sun, then it will be white with a little bit of yellow mixed in with it. And so at this stage, it just becomes a matter of, I've painted the foliage, I've painted the branches, and everywhere that's not either foliage or branches, that's not inside the sun, has to be sky. So now I'm going to start gradating that out. So this is not pure white, but it's just slightly yellowish white. And I need to go from this up to these pinks in that short space of time to make it look like a fairly smooth gradation. The other thing I do when I'm painting, I kind of have a plan, I know where I'm going, but I really focus on each element of the painting as though the painting, it kind of lives or dies by that. So when I'm blocking in the composition, I'm just totally focused on doing the best possible job I can. When I'm painting the foliage, again, focused on doing the best possible job I can. When I go to paint the sky, like every single stroke, I want it to be the best possible stroke that I can, because I can manage that. And that's kind of, Zoltan's able to tell you about that too, which was painting one brush stroke at a time. If you just worry about one brush stroke at a time and make that stroke or that shape a good stroke or shape, and then move on to the next one, then you can give it your full attention. I find a lot of artists, they want to paint loosely, but they confuse loosely with carelessly. So you could use, yes, you want to paint loosely ideally. Generally, the looser you can paint, the better, but you don't want to err on the side of inaccuracy or bad strokes just to paint loosely, because a loosely painted painting that has a lot of mistakes in it is a painting that will fail. But if you just focus on those strokes one at a time, and then don't worry about the next one is until you've got that one stroke good, and then think about, okay, what's the next good stroke? That limits it to bite-sized pieces of information. Okay, now I'm going to go to the birch tree areas. And the first thing I do here is I paint the scars on the birch tree. And I'm looking at my photo for this, but I'm just getting a sense of how the scars go. I'm not painting a portrait of this specific birch tree and looking to match scar for scar. I'm just kind of looking in general, how do the scars go here. And I've painted enough birch trees that, I can kind of fake it. But I still like to have something in front of me when I'm painting it, just to give me a sense of this particular tree, how did the scars generally go. And so I'm probably outside of the camera right now painting some up higher. Okay, so I painted the scars, and let's put a little one even. Have anything in there? Little one in there. Okay, and now it's time to start painting the birch trees. And so you've seen me paint birch trees before, but around the sun it's a little bit different, and this is actually a totally different palette mix because it is going to be so light right down in this area. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm coming in with, this is actually a purple, believe it or not, but very, very light in value, because around the sun, again, that property of diffraction means that everything around the sun is going to be much, much lighter than the areas away from the sun. And if you want to see diffraction in action, actually, if you have like a pot lamp or a spotlight or all those things, any sort of a direct kind of bright, intense light source, if you hold a string up in front of it and pull it tight so that the string passes directly in front of the light, you'll see that the string disappears. And that's because that light source is overwhelming that thin dark and actually making it disappear, almost like it's burning a hole through it. And that's actually what happens here in the foliage as well. There might actually be this branch actually does cut through the sun, but because of that property of diffraction, the sun is actually burning a hole through it. So the branches disappear, the foliage disappears. And this happens, again, this is totally in response to how bright the light is and how big or small those things are that are in front of it. If you have kind of a bigger branch going in front, it just might slightly eat into it, look like someone's taken a bite out of it. But when it's a thin, dark going in front of a strong light source, then it almost always makes it totally disappear. And again, so here we're just doing that gradation. And again, by having my colors set up almost like the color wheel, it just makes it much easier for me as I move around on my palette to know where I need to go next. Okay, and then back into the purple. Now this area here I will probably go over a couple times too, just because I want to get it as light as possible, and it might appear to be very light on camera there, but I can still see there's a lot of that dark from underneath kind of showing through, darkening the ultimate value that the eye sees. So as we come around here away from the sun, it shifts to blue. And then now, so that's the basic kind of the color transitions, but now it's all about the execution too, about getting that gradation to appear just right. I also like having some texture in there, so generally I don't like having it like a totally pure gradation without any brush strokes visible, because the brush strokes kind of suggests the texture on the birch tree. So that's that area kind of around the sun. I'm just trying to think, I can't recall exactly how far out. But as I move away from the sun, then this will get dramatically darker up here, and then it'll be much darker tones all the way up through the rest of the birch tree. But you will still have that gradation from kind of warm on this side to darkest in the middle and then lightest on the outside. Let me go in here now and fine tune this a little more. I know that right where the tree meets the birch tree, we should basically have pretty much, or sorry, where the tree meets the sun. I say where the tree meets the birch tree. Right where the tree meets the sun, it should be pretty much pure white on the birch tree. And as I said, I'll go over this. It will take me several applications of paint to get this as light as I want it, and also to get that gradation kind of exactly the way that I want it. I'm going to try and get this kind of as close to finish as I can all in one go. And then the next video will actually be doing the birch trees, so you'll be able to see me do the finishing touches, not only on the trees in general, but also this area kind of right close to the sun. But because, again, using that impasto medium with the paint means it sets up and gets sticky really quickly. So you can see now where I'm going over what's already, so there's a coat of white gesso on the canvas, as well as a coat of the titanium white paint. But you can see that area that I've just painted is quite a bit lighter than that. So if you are doing this, if you want it any place on your canvas, if you're painting on a toned canvas like I am, and that tone is kind of like a medium value red or reddish brown, don't be fooled and think because you put a stroke of titanium white or any kind of a white on there that it actually is a white, because that darkness of the canvas will have an impact and show through and darken the ultimate value the eye sees. And so that's a coat of gesso and 2 coats of titanium white to get that to actually approach a white in value. And you can see also that that initial outline that I did in white with a bit of yellow, it looks considerably darker than the area that we now see as white. So I will also go in and put a second coat. And again, that's just a function of the dark toned canvas having its impact showing through. Now when I go over with the second coat of this, now it's getting it so that this is the second lightest value on the canvas. And I want there to be a almost indistinguishable gradation from the white to that light yellow. And that also helps if the sun is not an absolutely perfect circle, you won't notice it because there's not a hard line that defines the outline of the circle. It's a gradation out from this circular-ish shape. And then now coming back in with the cadmium yellow light. And again, just go over it again and kind of continue painting that gradation from the light yellow to the yellows to the oranges and then to the reds. And you can see already now it's starting to give us the effect of the sun. Okay, so that's pretty much it for how I paint the sun. There's still some subtle finessing to do for me to totally finish it off. But it's just basically just adding to what I've done there. The basic concept is the same, which is that basically the sun is the lightest area on the painting, which is pure white. As we move out from the sun, we go from an almost white that's a pale yellow into a yellow, orange, red, and then we actually go into purples. And that's on kind of the dark trees. On the birch trees, it's the same sort of thing happens from a pale yellow to a blue, but it's happening in much more lighter kind of pastel tones. And then as we move up and down the birches away from the sun, it will get quite a bit darker, but that color transition will still be the same. The one thing that I've done, my actual camera cut out because I forgot the DSLR can only go for about 20 minutes. I've come back in here over the foliage, and wherever so the yellows and the oranges and the light greens that I had in here, as they've come closer to the sun, they've become brighter and more intense. And I just did that just by putting lighter, more intense strokes over top of the ones that I already had. So that's basically it for painting the sun. I mean, there's slight variations in every single painting, depending on where the sun is in relation to the trees and whether there's birch trees or hardwood trees next to it. But the basic theory is the same. And this is one of those things too, if you're interested in doing this and kind of painting this effect in one of your paintings, rather than kind of do this on a 3-foot by 4-foot canvas that you've already got finished, and now I'm going to try and put a sun in there. This is one of those times where it's worth spending some time doing intentional exercises. So if you take a piece of canvas and just try 4 or 5 times kind of doing this, of actually painting the sun until you feel comfortable doing it, and then use that and put that into a big painting. Rather than potentially trying this and ruining a painting, because it does take a little bit of practice to get this right. And if you're gonna put this in your paintings, you better nail it, because it is gonna be the thing that attracts everyone's attention. So if you've done it poorly, then it'll be a poor painting. As I've said before, a painting can only succeed as much as the weakest link in that painting, but particularly if your center of interest is handled poorly, it really doesn't matter how well I do everything else in this painting if I screw this up. So it's worth some time practicing it until you can feel comfortable with it before actually trying to build a painting around it. So I hope you have found this helpful. If you have, give me the thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Tell your friends because, again, I really like to grow this channel and get out there and reach as many people as possible. I welcome your comments and questions. I thank you for your time. I'm Tim Packer. I'll see you next time.